Amit Peled here, cellist, and I'm here with a very special friend, Jennifer Becker. And as you may know, I've been playing for the last 3 years on an amazing Carl Becker cello from 1931. I'm totally in love with it and see my life with it for the rest of it. My kids know now that they will get a mortgage on the house and a mortgage on a cello. That's all they get. So they really keep it safe because this is what they will get. But it's an amazing cello, and I'm now in Minnesota, and I thought it would be a great chance to talk to Jennifer about her grandfather, her father, your work, childhood memories from Chicago, from the house where they made the instruments in Wisconsin. I'm so blown away by the level of mastery, and in fact my audience know in every concert I say this is the American Stradivarius, and to my shock some people in Europe when I play they don't know who Becker was. So I think this would be good to maybe to start by early memories. What do you remember of your grandfather? And we take it from there.
Well, what I know is they built the house at Pickerel Lake. We always called it Grandma and Grandpa's house, and he started out in a room in that house making the instruments, and then he'd start them in Chicago, rough them out, they'd go to Wisconsin and in the summertime, and over the 3 months he would put the instruments together and do all the finishing and the final outside work and all this sort of thing. And that was since 1924. And then in 1951, my dad got married and they built the house in a garage, a separate garage, and the shop on top of the garage. And you should see the plans. He took architecture in high school and drawing and drafting.
Yeah.
And he drew out all the plans for the house and for the garage and the shop, and had everything figured out exactly where he was going to put all the varnish bottles and all the tools and all the clamps and everything. And they made the drawers. They got wooden drawers up there for all this stuff, and the cabinetry and all that. He made all of that.
Amazing.
And had a circular saw and a router and a planer that he used for that sort of thing. And
he liked fishing also, no?
And they liked fishing, so they would
this
get
was
up in
all
the
in
morning,
between fishing, yeah.
start 8 o'clock in the morning, start in on the instruments, and work till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they go fishing. Unless it was a really good day, like southwest wind, little chop on the water. Oh man, I
No
still
instruments.
remember. I'd be in the shop and they're looking out the window and they're looking at the lake because you could see the lake from the shop windows, and they go, "Oh, this is a great day for fishing." Yeah, I know. And work a little bit. Oh man, let's go fishing. And they'd take off and tell Mama and Grandma, "Make us a lunch, we're going." And they'd go muskie fishing.
Wow.
And head north and be gone for the rest of the day into the night and go muskie fishing and hopefully bring home a muskie, and sometimes not, but yeah, it was kind of equal.
And what I'm always fascinated, because people ask me this in concerts and I don't really know the answer. The wood that your grandfather used, where is it from?
It's from Europe,
Europe.
From Germany. The Mittenwald had wood dealers.
So he would go and...
He would go to Europe,
I
he
see.
would go to Germany. He did the sales trip with William Lewis and Son, with, oh gosh, what was his name? Olson?
So he would get enough wood.
And they'd go around shopping for instruments, but then he'd stop in Mittenwald and go to the wood dealer there and pick out the wood that he wanted, and then they'd ship it back.
Yeah.
And I remember back in 69, 67, there was a batch of wood that came with 3 big crates, wooden crates about the size of a refrigerator or more,
Oh my God.
of all this wood.
So many instruments around the world are now from that wood.
Yeah, and I remember we formed a chain gang to get the wood and put wax on the ends and then get it up in the attic.
Wow.
and you know, all this activity, and we saved one of the crates and made a playhouse out of it. We put windows in it and that. We'd play in that.
It's a real Becker
Yeah.
playhouse.
And So I still have some of that wood from '67.
Wow.
I used that.
And when
then
did
it
you
was
get into the
83.
picture of making
It was
instruments?
about that time.
Oh.
Yeah, I was 10.
So
I
you
was
worked with your
50.
grandfather? a
Yeah.
lot,
Oh yeah. He taught me. He was the one that insisted I go into the shop because I started carving when I was 8, and asked my dad what was needed to be a violin maker, and he says, well, you have to learn how to use the tools. So I started carving birds and fish and stuff, and he gave me a knife and a gouge with no instruction. I cannot believe I didn't seriously cut myself using that knife.
But that's how you learn, yeah?
But I learned, and the last thing I carved was a pelican with the beak, dug out and all that. So then I'm 10, and it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing, right? And I go to him, Daddy, I want to make a violin. And he went, oh God, no, you're too young, and you're a girl. What's that got to do with it?
Exactly.
So I took scraps out of their wood that had the outline on it from sawing things out, and I put together a piece of violin and glued it together. It took me all day to do this. And my dad got a kick out of it, put a brace in it, and carved a scroll for it, and we strung it up.
Wow.
And then I made corrugated cardboard ribs and back for it and put paper on it for varnish.
Do you still have it?
I do.
Wow.
It's in pieces. But I have it. My son calls it number 0.
But what amazed me, I mean, all the Beckers I know, but especially the grandfather, from what I experienced, is the power of sound.
Yeah.
How did he get, but then
Well,
there's
he had
also
the
warmth.
advantage. He had the advantage of looking at genuine Strads and Guarneris that came into the shop.
Yeah, but other makers have had that in the world, that doesn't make them
He
called
had
Becker.
the instinct. He had the instinct, I think.
But there was something, did he ever talk about the shape or what he's looking for, or how did he get them to sound like this?
And it has a lot to do with the arching and the graduation and the feel of it. And I remember making my number 1, I was arching it, and I had that a peak at the upper end of the back, and he walked by and said, oh, no, you can't have that. And he knew exactly the tone that would happen with that. And he said, no, you can't have, you have a terrible A string. No, you gotta cut this down, and even if you lower the height of the arching, you gotta get rid of this bump. You can't have that on there. And that was very insistent about that. And he had me feel an arching. He said, run your hand over. See this? You feel this bump here, and this. You got to get rid of that and use that. Never mind the gauges. Never mind the measurements. Get the feel right. And that was very informative, and I still do that today. You can feel what you want, and you can see the sound. I see the sound when I look at a shape. Okay, and if you want a broader sound, then you make it a little wider across the top and down. If you want it more focused, you make it a little rounder. You don't want it pointy.
Yeah.
You don't want it dug in too much around the middle bout. That gives you a nasally sound, or too much of a collected sound. It doesn't expand.
And the grandfather, he studied with his father, or
no?
But
I
the
think
original that came from Germany.
No, it was Herman Macklet that came over from Germany, and that was Grandpa's grandfather.
Okay, so
And he was an upholsterer, and then he started making violins. He played the violin and was fascinated with violins, so he learned how to make a violin. And I think he learned from looking at a violin, because his instruments look a lot like violin. But he died before my grandfather met him.
Oh.
But he went with his father, who was a famous violinist and teacher. He actually studied from Joachim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he'd go to the shop with him, and that was Lane.
In Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago on Clark Street. And I think that's where he got the bug to do this work. So he started when he was 14.
And I heard from colleagues, cellists, that like in the 50s, 60s in Chicago Symphony, the entire cello section played on a Becker cellos.
Not the whole section.
No, I know, but I mean, it's a saying that goes around.
Yeah.
If they didn't play on a Becker, they had one at home.
Yeah.
But it was but what I wanted to know is, did he make them for a specific commission of a person, or he made them every summer, and
there were
then people bought them?
There were a few instruments he made special for some people, and I think those are mostly in the first 100 instruments that he made.
So that would be until when approximately?
1924.
24, okay.
That's when he started numbering the instruments. He started them at 100.
Oh,
and
okay.
before that, he had a journal where he wrote down every instrument that he made and who owned it, and the payments they made.
So
$10 a month.
after 1924, he made them because he wanted to make.
He wanted to make, yeah. He always
But you
wanted
see,
to make.
I'm asking this because the art of making or composing, for instance, composers today, they would not write a note before you commit with a contract, $1,000 a minute, and there are some makers that will not make an instrument before you commission it and pay down payment. But Schubert wrote 9 symphonies and never heard them.
Wow.
Schubert wrote the magnificent 2 cello quintets.
Mm-hmm.
And not only he didn't hear it, he lost it. They found it above a cupboard in his house. He lost the score, yet it's the most amazing piece. So my point is that these amazing composers, Mozart wrote music all the time, he needed to.
Yeah.
So a composer today would write, if they're successful, 4 pieces a year, maybe 3, and get really well paid. Back then, they wrote every day,
Yeah.
and I feel that the great makers, they went to the shop and made instruments.
Well, the drive to create.
Exactly, it's an
was so
artistic
strong.
drive.
Grandpa would work at Lewis's during the day, and then he'd come home, and 3 nights a week, he'd make instruments at home.
Amazing.
And my grandmother would sit there and read Dickens books to him.
While he's making.
While he was making, to keep him company.
So that's why the
Sherlock
sound,
Holmes.
the Dickens, he heard.
Dickens and Sherlock Holmes, all the Sherlock Holmes stories. She would read the Sherlock Holmes stories to my grandfather while he was making in the shop. Okay?
See,
And that's what
an
they did
amazing
3
story.
nights a week. And then on Wednesdays, they get together with friends and play music and play quartets because he played
Wow.
the cello. And Saturdays,
No
my dad would come
Netflix,
over.
no TV.
No,
no
it was
that
radio
crap.
on that. And then on Saturday they'd work all day on the new instruments, and they always started the next batch on Christmas Day.
Uh-huh.
So they work on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. There was an opportunity to work all day.
But that's real art. That's artists. It's like people ask me, do you practice scales every day? Of course I do, but what if you don't have a concert? It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
Well, for some it does. So, but I'm not surprised because the sound and the beauty of the instruments, it was made by a great artist. I mean, you can see it and hear it. So,
And I'm wondering if Grandpa had a little of that I do, where he could, I see colors when I listen to a sound. If something is sick, I can see it.
yeah.
The colors are not right. And I can hear the sound that an instrument's going to make by running my hands over it. And, my dad was all more about the measurements and getting things perfect. He was a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So the 2 of them were,
Perfect.
yeah.
And they never
team.
fought? Or was it like a commander?
They had discussions. And I remember a story my grandmother said. They decided to build a boat, okay? And this boat is still at Pickerel Lake.
Really?
And it was a wooden boat with a canvas cover on it, okay? And it's a rowboat.
I bet if you put string to that boat, it would
Brass
sound
screws, beautiful, varnished
amazing.
boat. And they were having a discussion about how to put a piece together or something like that. And they were working on this over at my mom and dad's house, which was a little distance away from Grandma's house. And she heard the most god-awful argument going on. She went over there and said, "What is going on? Why are you arguing?" And they both looked at her and said, we're not arguing. We're discussing this. So yeah, they're passionate.
And for those cellos from 1946, you said all the instruments are together.
Yeah, then that's
So was there like
the instruments that are labeled Carl Becker and Son are the instruments that my dad worked on with my grandfather. All the labeling is exactly who made the instrument.
Yeah, it's amazing. And for that collaboration, did they have a routine of you do the front, I do the back, I do the scroll, or was it
somewhat? I mean, they were both working all the same time, and my dad did the ribs and the linings and then constructed those. Grandpa would do some of the rough out work on the backs and the tops, and then my dad would rough out the arching with a router and that, and then as each piece was finished, he'd hand it off to Grandpa and he'd start planing it. And he did the arching. My dad would do the purfling. They both did F-holes. Grandpa hated scrolls, so my dad did all the scrolls.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because when Grandpa was 18, he was working on a scroll, and the wood broke, and the chisel rammed into his thumb and cut the tendon on his thumb. So his thumb was always bent way back.
Really?
And when it came time for me to do a scroll, he came to me and says, now you listen to your father. You be careful what you're doing on this. You see this thumb? This is what happened to me. And he told me that story. And it's like, and so he lived his whole life with a thumb that was, bent. The tendon
and being
was
scared
bent.
of scrolls.
Yeah. So
he
had to make those 6 scrolls for Morton Ginsburg. Oh, the cussing. And they were so emphatic about getting things done right.
Yeah.
Okay, Grandpa made the scrolls, he made a couple of instruments, and he had 1 Strad and 1 Guarneri model. So he set the neck. He grabbed the wrong scroll.
Oh.
He put the Guarneri, I think it was the Strad model on the Guarneri model violin. Glued it in, and then they looked at it and said, oh no. Maybe you can recut the scroll. Maybe you can do that. And Grandpa thought about it. And no, and the next thing you know, he's taking the top off, taking the neck out to put the right one on that instrument. And that was a lot of work to put in a new end block and to do it right. That was a lot of work. I don't know if other people would have done that.
The legendary violinist Shmuel Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
You know him well. For me, he's such a legend and a friend now. He told me such a great story about your father doing adjustments, and it's actually, he said that one of his students in Chicago was the second violinist of the Alban Berg Quartet, and he heard while living in Chicago as a student that your father is doing these great adjustments. If you go to him, and he's very particular and very perfect about it.
Yeah.
So he brought the violin to him, and he said, I need it for a week, and just for adjustment. So he left the violin for a week. He came back after 1 week, and it was pricey, but he took the violin and said, oh, it sounds great. He took the violin, and it has the same bridge and same sound post. And he said, Mr. Becker, I left it here for a week. So, oh yeah, don't forget. And he gave him 6 different bridges and sound posts. And he said, but mine is on. And he said, yeah, that sounded the best, so I put it back.
I remember him doing that.
So he made 6 bridges
Yes.
and sound posts for him.
Yeah.
Tried them, honest. I mean, that's honesty that, like, I have goosebumps now.
Yeah.
I wish makers would have that kind of sincerity.
He tried different widths on the bridges and different designing of the feet. And I remember him doing that job.
But you know,
And
today,
post a different position.
they'll put one and you pay a lot for it, and that'll be the one.
Yeah.
And it will have the name of that famous whoever made it, and that's it.
Yeah.
But to make 6 of them, to give it to the student, to say, well, yours sounds better, I'm sorry. So that's for me, that's amazing. Now I have 2 really important questions as a cellist.
Okay.
One is about the varnish. So my cello, people ask me, is it a female or a male? So for me, it's a female. And why? Because it's a red hair woman for me. And
Okay.
not only to say that I'm attracted to red hair women, but I also had two girlfriends in my teenage days that were red hair, and I mean a red hair person is a personality.
Yeah.
Strong.
Yep.
And it just fits this cello so well, and it's this kind of, I would say, red or blondish or yellowish, but what, if you can tell, if it's not a secret, what is behind the varnish of Becker cellos or instrument that is so unique? I mean, you can recognize it right away.
Well, my grandfather came up with the recipe. I still use it.
So the family still has,
oh yeah,
like Coca-Cola.
The procedure, yep, the procedure, the recipe, whatever, the process that we use, we're still doing the same one today.
That's amazing. And he, of course, went through trial and errors.
Yeah, he
probably.
did some experimenting, but hit on this recipe pretty quick.
But the brightness of it, or the lightness, because as I mentioned when you came and worked on my cello today a little bit, it's so, for me, it's so beautiful and strong, but yet kind of soft, like you just touch it.
Yeah,
and
it's very soft, and that's the same as the Strad Guarneri varnish in the older Italian instruments. They'll chip and mark very easily if you're dealing with the original varnish. And most of the instruments have a polish over them to protect it and all that, so there's very few left of the original surface of the Italian varnish.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the Del Gesù I worked on. It had been left in somebody's garage or something like that for years, and Charles Beer brought it to my dad to have him work on it and clean it. So the next thing you know, my dad's handing me the instrument and says, here, clean this, and it was totally black.
Wow.
The whole instrument was in this black surface, and I don't know if you've noticed, but where your hand touches, the varnish will turn black.
Yeah.
It's affected.
Yeah,
okay.
of course.
So the whole thing was black.
Wow.
And if you're not careful, you take off the black, but you also take off some of the original. And he said, now you're gonna have to be very careful with this, because straight water that we use gets off most of it, is gonna be too strong. So I cleaned that instrument, and I used a water with a little oil on it, and that worked. And very, very carefully, not too hot and all this. And the glow of the underneath, oh my God, it was gorgeous. And it no polish on it. And it was just the original varnish, and we finished it up, and it was like a gem.
Well, it's the Becker varnish, the few that I know, and again, it's mainly the cellos that I know are just so
it's the same on the violin.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Same on all of them.
Now, this is the other question I have, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but for some reason, the cellos of Becker are considered, I mean, they're more valuable, they're, let's say, more, I would say, prominent artists plays them, they do better. From a maker point of view, is there any reason to it, or for you they're all the same? Because, I mean, you can't argue with facts,
I think
why
my
cellos?
grandfather played the cello, and he had an understanding about the instrument, how to set it up and how to make it so it was easy to play. And he just drew on his knowledge of working on the genuine instruments and observed them, and because not everybody has that opportunity to have a Strad apart and to work on it and look at it and make observations and all this kind of thing. And that's an advantage of working with them, is I had that same opportunity. But he wrote everything down. He remembered everything.
Oh, he wrote it.
I've got notes. I've got graduation charts going all the way back.
Wow, that's.
And they never.
That's
well,
like
I
the soup Nazi recipes. Do you know the Seinfeld episode? So these recipes hang to them.
Sure.
But the other question is about the size of the cello. So there are basically two significant models. Now the big one and the small. Mine is sort of the normal one, but being a giant, I love that because, as you said, so easy to play.
Well, one thing I noticed about your cello is the F holes are set a little bit wider than some of them. I had a 1941 where the outline was a little bit wider than yours,
Uh-huh.
and the F's were spread like that. And
But when did they start the bigger model and why? What-
that was from Harry Sturm in Milwaukee. He was principal of Milwaukee Symphony, and all of this, most of the Strats are cut down.
Yeah, I
They
know.
were like an inch bigger than that, and Harry was always fascinated with making a cello like the old size. So he talked my dad and grandfather into doing that, and that's when they made the big model cello. And this was back in '67.
Oh.
I think.
I-
It was '67. It was right when I started out.
And from then on, they
Yeah.
made mostly that model? or-
No, there's only a handful of big model cellos that are made.
Oh, I would
And
love
the
to.
stop length is a little bigger, so you need to spread your fingers.
You know, I think
It's a
every
big
cellist
instrument.
go through that phase of, you know, the bigger the cello, the better the sound. Oh, we all.
Well, it
we
is.
all,
There's like 20% more
I know. I mean,
tone.
I went through many years actually of looking for just the biggest, because also with my size, people would tell me, "Are you too big or the cello too small?"
Yeah.
But having this cello, I'm really realizing size doesn't matter, but it's a comfort that you have
Sure.
that will allow you. And then, I mean, when you think of violin, of great violins, they're so small and they can sound.
Yeah.
But I find that this model, sort of the normal,
You like the
Side.
voice.
the voice, yeah, and,
You
and
know,
the ease, and
and
the
with
big
the-
ones, you know, it makes you feel good. Wow, I'm playing a big cello, but most of I'm not talking about Becker. Most of them are muddier and harder to actually use on stage, which is what we should think of.
Sure.
But so, yeah. But you have been working on hundreds of Becker instruments, maintaining them. Yeah.
Yes,
You're
yeah,
gonna
over the
work on
years,
mine as
Yeah.
well, and
Sure.
so you have the knowledge of the past
Yep.
to the present, and
And I had 2 teachers to 1 student. You learn.
yes.
So yeah, the time I spent with my grandfather was very precious to me. I learned a lot, and my dad they tag teamed. My dad would come in and give me a lecture on how to do things and explain with a lot of words on what to do and all this, you know.
Mhm.
And my grandfather would sit down when I cut the F holes on my first violin. My dad was still down for lunch. My grandpa was there, and he said, "Okay, now watch me." And he cut the F's. Careful here. Careful
Wow.
here. Now you do it. That was the extent of the lecture.
Wow.
And I just watched him, and I went and I cut him in about 15 minutes. My first violin. Cut him out.
Wow.
My dad got back from lunch, and he went, "Oh, you did it already." I said, "Yeah."
Well, you know, it reminds me of a story of Daniel Barenboim, the great pianist. In his book, he says that his father was his only piano teacher.
Oh,
and
wow.
and there's one chapter he talks about his technique, and he says, "My only technique lesson was one time I was 5 years old. My father told me, sit in front of the piano as if you're eating dinner and play." That was it.
That was it.
And I sat and played, and that was my technique lesson. So it
Wow.
reminded me with the F holes.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Just
Do it.
watch me. And that's how you can learn this business.
Of course.
You have to see it. And if you can see it and then go do it, that's the best way to learn. That's
It's
the best
amazing,
way to learn.
I'm really moved. You know, I've played for so many years, of course, at Pablo Casals cello for 6 years, but an Andres Guarneri before, and a Grancino after, and Viome, and you name it. But to sit with a direct line to the maker and to talk like this, it's amazing. But also, I really feel that the Becker cellos, I mean, the few that I know, mostly senior, we call him,
Yep.
are just for what we need today, for the big stages, the way people play, the strings that we're using, the change of weather. I mean, we travel much more than before, much faster.
Yeah.
The strength of the instruments is just, it's amazing, and I think that's why they became so pricey. I'm just shocked how much they cost now, those instruments.
They're over 200,000.
Well over.
The violins are 100 or more.
Amazing.
You know,
I mean, cellos, I've already heard few that are reaching up to the three. I mean, asking price. I'm not saying that people pay, but
That's new.
but you'll be surprised, you know, when you and I will be gone.
Yeah.
There will be, you know, much more because the condition of them is so good, and
Yeah.
the immediate impact of, okay, how does it sound? You know,
Yeah.
the sound of it is just, it's just amazing. So I feel really privileged to own one and to play it.
Well, Grandpa
It's
made,
amazing.
8 instruments a year,
Amazing.
and 51 that was the most prolific. They made 16 violins and 3 cellos and 3 violas that year. They needed the money for building the house. And I think Lewis has bought all their instruments, so they didn't have individual commissions.
Yeah.
Until, let's see, there was Harry Sturm with his big model cello. He commissioned a quartet. So then they did the big model viola, 17
wow.
and 3/8" viola.
Amazing. Do you know where they are now, those quartets? Where?
Yeah, I don't remember where the violins are exactly, but I know the viola is out east, and I've worked on that.
Oh. Is it hard to play? I mean, it's much bigger.
No, because they kept the string length not too
Yeah.
big, and always used a very reasonable sized neck, so it's easy to get around. And we've made more 17 and 3/8" violas, and then there's one in the principal in Omaha has one.
Oh.
Thomas Klug. I worked
And
on
the
that.
cello
with my dad.
is
The
big.
big model cello,
yeah.
that's down in Alabama. That's in
Oh.
Birmingham. I see that every year, or every
Wow.
other year.
And some of your
Yeah.
father's cellos, at least that I've seen, became more red than yellow varnish.
It depends on
But
the
it
year.
depends on the, okay.
That instrument, Harry Sturm's cello, was about the reddest they've gone.
So they just tried new.
Just, let's make a red one this year. Let's do red, let's do more golden, let's do orange red, or, that kind of thing. That's classic orange,
Yeah.
red orange varnish from the 30s. 40s was a little lighter orange. 56 through 58 was the dark red, and then they got into the 60s, and that was also very dark red. Then they went back to the orange red.
Mm-hmm.
My number 1 is kind of more of an orange, and then I went to a very deep color red
Mm-hmm.
for 5 instruments that I made, number 9 through number 14. I wanted to make a really, really dark red, like Grandpa's from the 20s. And my dad saw it work, and he goes, "No, that's red."
And
So-
where do you get the wood? Is it also?
It's the same wood
same-
that they bought.
Oh, it's still.
Yeah, I get half the supply.
Oh wow! So you still have that supply?
Oh yeah, there's enough wood there for the rest of my life.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah, so I'm still using the same wood that my dad
And
grandfather
you are
did.
still going every summer to the same summer
That's
place?
just for vacation. The shop
So you
has
don't
been
work? Yeah. Okay.
emptied. My brother got the tools that he wanted, and I got some of
I
the
see.
stuff that I did. He's got most of the wood in Chicago, and I go down and get a few pieces and stuff like that as needed.
Amazing.
And he has a shop down in Chicago where he does his making, and I do all my making in my shop where I work now. So I do a little bit of making. I try to do making almost every day, and at least once a week. There's like one day a week that's making. It's usually Wednesday.
Who is reading Dickens for you when you make the?
Oh no, no. He feeds me.
Yeah.
He makes supper. I come home and he hands me a plate
But
of
I'm
food.
gonna try now the Dickens while practicing
Okay.
and have like an audiobook,
Uh-huh.
because people think I'm crazy, but one of my teachers, Boris Pergamenchikov, an amazing teacher, actually convinced me to try to practice while watching TV, watching sport. And people think it's crazy, but he said, if you can concentrate well, you'll see the benefit of it. And I thought it's crazy, but then I saw a documentary with Perlman, and he says that his best technique practice is when you watch baseball.
Really?
So I have to admit, and my students know, that the first hour of my day when I do the scales, I watch the news. I watch the news and I'm extremely concentrated. It's when I do the routine, kind of the routine work. But when you tell me that your grandfather actually made instrument while his wife reading Dickens to him or Sherlock Holmes, I'm not surprised because you can read and get into a subconscious mode that I feel in practicing. So I'm gonna try actually use the time for audiobooks maybe.
Okay.
We'll see, but that might be a tip.
It's interesting because I find it, I have a hard time working when there's music, singing.
Yeah.
Okay, words and singing. I get distracted of what I'm doing, trying to understand the words. If it's regular music, that's okay, but I like it silent. And that was one thing in the shop. It had to be silent, no talking when people were working. And that was like a rule in the shop.
But then he
No
made it
talking.
home.
Silent.
But then the Dickens.
I don't know. But when I was in the shop, it was like no talking unless they were instructing me on something. Because I find it valuable to listen to your work. You know, you hear how the wood is cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm teaching somebody how to make, it needs to be silent when we're working. And I can hear if they're going the wrong direction or using the wrong plane or something. And that kind of startled me sometimes. I'd be working in the other room and doing the arching, and Grandpa would call, "You're using the wrong plane," or "You're going the wrong direction."
You would hear it.
Or "Your plane is dull. Sharpen your tools." You know, they could hear that.
Wow.
And you can't hear that if you've got other noise going on.
Well, my last question, I'm just interested because many times greatness is realized after the person has been gone. But did your grandfather realize how great of a maker he was during his lifetime? And then your father too, but mainly the grandfather. Like, did they realize the tradition?
Something was there, and I know there was a big dinner in '54 for Grandpa, and that was when he kind of semi-retired or something. They honored Grandpa. Everybody came. They had a concert and a big plaque was signed and all this kind of stuff. And the moniker that people gave him was Dr. Violin.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he must have known that he was, but they never talked about it. Like, oh, I really know what I'm doing. They didn't,
No, of course, but
that.
just the work, like you said, there was a period of red varnish, but did they realize while they're making it that, wait, but that instrument is going to stay now for a long time. People might write books about it, or we'll hear it in a CD very soon with a famous player. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility, but yet...
I think, there was this attitude about making an instrument for the ages. This is going to be existing many years, so you need to make it right. And it was always that approach, is like, whatever you do your best. And it's done right, and you take the time to make sure it's done right. No corners were cut, to make a quality item, and that I think really shows in the result.
Absolutely, yeah.
That really shows in the result, and I know Grandpa was proud of his work. And when you do comparison, I gotta tell you this story. Principal in Chicago came in.
Cellist?
A violinist.
Concert, yeah.
Bragging about this Strad that he was playing and how he could pick it out of a room full of instruments. And the way the glissando responded, he'd know this instrument anywhere, and he could pick this out of it everywhere. Okay, well, if you brag like that with Grandpa, he would call you on it. So he blindfolded the man and had him play the Strad and had him play a Becker. I don't know which one, didn't matter. He played the Becker, and he picked the Becker as, oh yes, this is the one, it has such a wonderful play. So they did it, he didn't believe it. So they did it again, and they blindfolded him, and he did the playing, and he picked the Becker again. And that did it. The guy left mad.
I thought he left with a violin.
No, he left upset and mad, and I don't know if he came back. But I mean, you say something like that to my grandfather, he would really call you on it.
Yeah.
and say, okay, prove it, you know. So that was a fun story.
Well, I wish, after playing it now for 3 years and recording and everything, I wish I would have met him in person, but this is the closest we can get. So thank you so much. This is really
Well, thank
special.
you, and this is kind of fun to do.
Yeah. Well, okay. But I mean, we don't need the camera. It was fun to talk